Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. Today, we're going to see how many perspectives we can cram into a very small window of time and some little boxes on your screen. Because today we're here with three professors who our firm's been fortunate to work with now over many years. I want to say 8, 9 years, something like that. I mean, geez. Avi and Josh and Ajay are all faculty at the University of Toronto who together from their different perspectives, managerial, economic, et cetera, have become not only experts in, but the facilitators of a community of expert economists and others studying artificial intelligence. So their last book, Prediction Machines, really helped me understand how to think about AI in the sense that what is AI? It is ultimately an engine for making predictions, and that really crystallized a lot for me. And so now they've got a new book coming out, which is called Power and Predictions, which I'll let them tell you about in the context of answering the following questions. So the question today is, I'm a working person. I read all this stuff about AI. What do I actually need to know about how AI is going to impact my work? And so I'll turn it over to all of you. And thank you for being here.
It strikes me just thinking about the 9 years we've worked with you. Little do you know that about 5 years ago, the three of us thought, we're collecting a lot of data through our accelerator. I wonder if we can use that data to generate an AI that does your job, Roy.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, so we wondered if we could do that. Could we actually pick better startups and work out where the investment would go and do whatever it is that you do all day? The magic that you do, could we replicate that with AI? And, it turned out, believe it or not, we can't. It turns out you do something else. I don't know what it is, but you do something else.
You're looking at it right now.
And so
we've already talked about whether it's real work. I don't know if it is or it isn't.
We're not sure whether it was work or what it is, but there's some sort of magic that goes there that's just not showing up in the data, that isn't at the current levels of capabilities of AI. But we do have our eye on you because basically you're an evil venture capitalist. And of course, who wouldn't want to get rid of you?
Okay, so good. So how would we do that? But sorry, keep going.
Roy, let me just build on Joshua's opening there. I didn't know how he was going to open it, but now we're going to go with it. So in our first book, we focused on the role of machine intelligence as a tool for prediction, computational statistics for prediction. And so in the case of let's say a venture capitalist, the primary prediction job might be trying to predict which companies will most likely be successful,
correct,
and generate equity value for their investors. And so imagine that you could build an AI that would be very good at that prediction. It would be superhuman. It would be as good as the best VC at predicting, which companies are likely to succeed. So imagine now you had that, and your competitors had that in your back pocket. How would the market change? So now what would happen is you would all have these predictions. Of course, predictions, have some error bar on them, so they're not going to be for sure correct, but they'll.
It's okay. We get it wrong 90% of the time in our line of work. So our line of work is very tolerant for error bars.
For errors.
You're called a low bar industry.
Low bar industry. I like it.
So then all the other things that you do in order to, in some sense, compete for the deal, the relationships you build, like in your case, the thesis that you have, your firm has really leaned into your thesis on future of work, and so you guys have an expertise in that area that differentiates you, in addition just to the personalities of the individual partners, but. I think throughout what we're talking about in our new book, a lot of it has to do with the other part that we call judgment, that's on the other side of prediction. So in other words, when you're making a decision, there's the prediction component and the judgment component. And so even if prediction in this case got better than human prediction and was commoditized so that other VCs could buy the same prediction, it would push all the action and the competition onto the judgment part. I don't know, Avi, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Can I just ask one clarification question? When you say judgment, one of the things that I struggled with at first in understanding how AI, machine intelligence, was a source of prediction. I knew from, my basic statistics what a regression line looked like. And, and we used a simple regression to predict which people would successfully start venture-backed companies. So that's, a prediction of one element of the process. But then, a lot of what the AI was doing looked like judgment, making a judgment about whether or not an image was a boat or a car, that kind of thing. And I came to reconceptualize that in my head as predicting whether a human being would call that a boat or a car if they were accurate. Maybe that's not quite the right way to think about it. You can correct me. But so when you say judgment in that context, what do you mean by judgment?
Well, so one example of judgment in this case would be, what's the cost of a mistake? So in other words, when I say predicting whether a startup will be successful, there might be, you can think of some kind of outcome distribution where it's what's the likelihood of this being $1 billion company, a $500 million company, a $10 billion company. And so the AI sticks probabilities beside each of those potential outcomes. And different VCs may have different tolerance for risk. And so that's one element of judgment, which is, am I willing to go for this company? I think could be a $50 billion company on the one hand, because it's got a huge TAM, but on the other hand, it's got a very volatile founder, and it could, there's a reasonable chance it's a zero. Whereas another VC may have the exact same data, and their judgment may be different, and they have a different way of assessing the cost of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I hear also the room for preferences in there, because one thing we often say around our table is we think we can make a lot of money investing in this company, but we just don't want to serve this founder. We either have, an ethical concern about them, or sometimes it's just subjective of who we think we can work well for. And so there's room for that. And sorry, Avi, I interrupted. I think you were going to elaborate on some of what.
No, I was actually going exactly where you went, which is a key part of judgment is knowing what you value and knowing what matters to you. So part of that is this somebody you can work with? Part of that is, as you said, you built a prediction tool to figure out which founders were likely to be successful. There's judgment in knowing that matters for your ultimate goal of generating, a return on the investment in a way that you're comfortable with. And so a big part of judgment are those elements. And like these kinds of tools affect work in all sorts of places. So we can think about it in your industry. We can think about it in, a tool can scale up the ability of workers all over the place. So like recently saw in Yokohama, Japan, there was a taxi company that started to use an AI to predict where there were going to be people who needed to get picked up. Okay, so simple tool. And what they found was it allowed the relatively unproductive taxi drivers to be closer to the more productive taxi drivers. And we see that kind of idea all over the place in work. So this was one where it closed 15% of the gap between the least productive and the most productive. You see it in call centers in sales calls where AIs can close the gap between the medium skilled and the most skilled workers. And a lot of, in the short term, where we're seeing AI have an impact is upskilling, having medium skilled workers getting closer and closer to the highest skilled. Now, but we'd like to go a step further and think through, beyond upskilling. Well, once you can train people really quickly and get them up to speed to be as good as the best, now maybe you can reimagine what the company looks like. And so once you have, if you're a taxi driver, if your job is to drive people around, but instead of taking 3 years to learn the city and how to get from place to place, it now takes 2 weeks because the AI upskills you in a massive way. Now there's a whole bunch of people who used to not want to invest those years in becoming a driver to become a driver. And that's exactly what Uber and Lyft have done.
Yeah.
They've reimagined work by upskilling a whole bunch of people who could not have been, whose job could not have been driving others from place to place, and now they can. And so I think that model is going to show up in terms of impacting work all over the place, which is once you can upskill quickly, you can reimagine which people can do which jobs.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I hear you when you say that, by the way, what I think of is the taxi drivers in London who have to study the knowledge about, how to know all the intricacies of all the streets in London. And it's like, well, Google figured that out for me. I'm cool. And
sorry, Roy, just interrupt you on that, just to kind of lock down on that point.
Please.
So that, what Avi just said, like the difference between giving a mediocre taxi driver, an AI that enhances their ability so that they become as good as a good taxi driver. Okay, that's what we would call a point solution. Versus taking people who have had zero training and they skip the whole 3 years of the knowledge that you described in London, and they can flip open Waze or another navigational AI, and they can drive as well as the person who studied for 3 years, so that you can reimagine the system. That is the essence of our new book. So our original prediction machines book was about the first case where you take a point solution. And the new book is about wait a minute. Our first book was really targeted at these point solutions that are important, but they're not the big transformation that everyone's been talking about. The big transformations are these system levels. And the example that the world has seen probably more broadly than any other is the Uber example.
Yeah, I mean, I see we have this comment from a user on LinkedIn that says, that what their way of describing some of the system is human in the loop interfaces, which is one way that a point solution can spread beyond just the technology itself. And what I hear you saying, Ajay, is something that is even more systemic, which is let's just rethink. Maybe if we can predict where people need to be picked up, we don't need a taxi company at all. We can skip to some other form of transit or something like that. And what I find interesting about this moment, I'm curious in your teaching and research, how you're finding it is, you've approached this from a system perspective, the company as a system, the economy as a system. And then we also have point solutions being adopted by individuals who can speed things up. I mean, I've been playing with GPT-3 endlessly and talking about it all the time. And so I'm curious when you see, so in that case, by the way, what do? I use a text engine for things like, hey, somebody wrote me a really long email. I'll put it in GPT-3 and be like, summarize this email for me. I just did it with a newsletter. This morning, I was like, what tips does it have about inclusivity at work? And it turned into 5 bullet points. And so one of the questions I have is, we have this task as an economy, as a society right now, of reimagination. We have all kinds of other tasks, transitions, and how do we make sure the most vulnerable are protected. But just in the case of introducing innovation, we struggle to come up with intuitions for how these new systems ought to work. And so I'm curious, either as you've done research for the book, or as you've seen others, your students or your researchers you work with or yourselves, how have you built intuition personally and taken some agency over what these AIs can do and look like?
Well, the kind of answer is that we adopt a frame that says AI is useful when it's impacting on a decision. What sort of decision is it going to impact on? It's one where there's a lot of uncertainty around it. And it's quite interesting because often we deal with uncertainty by avoiding the decision entirely. If we don't know what the weather is going to be like, you choose to take an umbrella or not, depending on your preferences. Once you get a prediction of the weather, you might alter that decision. So fundamentally, that's where AI is entering any of these systems itself, at the level of a decision. But the problem that we find is, okay, you're allowing yourself to summarize a newsletter, etc. That's going to be great for your particular job. Partly because what you're doing doesn't have, on that day-to-day level, major consequences elsewhere.
Sure.
However, if someone developed an AI that was able to look very precisely at social media texts and other things like that, that would allow you, for some of the businesses that you're looking at, to come to an extremely quick decision regarding their likelihood of survival in 10 years. Okay, that's something that would previously take you months to do. Not only that, it would previously take anyone months or even longer to do. That's going to affect that whole process. I mean, we've already seen a bit of this occur. The VC industry has hardly been a static one. We've seen more and more changes in the timeline of when startups get funding. So there's a sense in which already, transformation is part of that industry. But we can imagine worlds in which here's an industry where there's some key uncertainties. If AI can provide any clues that really move the needle on that, you can imagine there'd be a full-on reallocation of resources, just like we saw in the ride-sharing space. And so the way we do it, and we like to do these sorts of things in these books, is to try and be ruthlessly practical.
Yes,
anyone can be pie in the sky, imagineering and stuff like that. But basically what we do is we say, look at your business and see if you can identify what that core uncertainty is. If you had access to an oracle and you could ask them one question in your business, what would it be? And here's the thing. If you can even get to that stage, you're winning. Because remember I said that a lot of what we do in regard to uncertainty is take measures so that it doesn't matter to us. You build your house so that it's earthquake proof. Precisely because you then don't have to worry about whether there's earthquakes coming or not. So you don't worry about that anymore. Similarly, businesses have set up all sorts of rules and procedures that have been there and able to stay because people have said, I know there's uncertainty out there, but we don't know what's going to happen. So we're just going to do the same thing day in, day out.
And just to make sure that I understand that, then as an individual, what I ought to be paying attention to in order to figure out some habits of mind for redesigning the system is, where am I averse to making a decision or defaulting to some extreme because I previously thought you just can't know?
Well, actually, you're more likely defaulting to a non-extreme.
Okay.
The opportunities are all in the extremes or in the less frequent stuff. But nonetheless, that is correct. You have to sort of think about where those are. And, we can sit here in our own university space because it's our job and our domain, and we can identify some of those things. And we do that exercise in the book. And because we've touched the healthcare system, we have some ability to imagine uncertainty there. And Jay is on the board of directors of an insurance company, so we worry about that. But in everybody's individual business, when you have to pull yourself out, that's the starting point.
I love that. Okay. Well, I think we're running short on time. Just so in case folks want the book, I've just intentionally done a spelling check here so that everybody has to pay attention that this is not actually the title of the book, that we've dropped an S here because we're going to be making more than one prediction. But just for buying the book, you can go to bit.ly/power and prediction and buy the book. And then I'll also say in an hour, as you know, but just for our audience, we're going to be going on Twitter Spaces and talking about in depth with you about the book. We've got a great group lined up of guests, and our partner James Cham is going to be the one doing the interview. Any final parting thoughts before we wrap?
Yeah, just once on the selling of the book. With Roy mentioned GPT-3, you'll never know. This might be the last book you can read on the business of AI that was written by humans.
There you go.
You really want to take it as a collector's item now.
For nostalgia purposes, I am in on that. And then, we'll archive this conversation. You can find all the other questions on thisisnotadvice.work. By the way, the reason we say it's not advice is none of us knows what you should do in your individual circumstance, your industry. We're giving you our ways of thinking about it. If you prefer short audio, you can just go to jam.ai. I'm not expecting anybody to have that whole URL typed in so quickly, and you can get a short audio version. And I just want to say it is such a joy to get to be a beneficiary of your stream of research, to get to see the three of you collaborating as a team and to open up all of our eyes. And so here's to many, many more years of us getting to do this together. Thank you, Avi Goldfarb, Ajay Agrawal, Josh Gans, all faculty at the University of Toronto, and their new book is Power and Predictions. So thank you all.
Thanks very much, Roy.
Continued. Bye, folks.
Bye.